This gospel is not just for 2 millennia ago, it's for this group here, without exception, in this time and space that we have right now on the planet. Why? If this issue is not handled, there will be unfinished business on the other side. In the 1970s sometime, there was a spectacular case of a young newly ordained priest in Kerala, Joseph, who had a terrible accident while going to celebrate what we're doing right now in one of the churches that he had care of. And he found himself on the other side. He was on an unprotected motorbike. And when his body and soul were separated, he was given a guided tour. An angel showed him the other side, the different compartments, and I think you know which I mean. I'll just dwell for a second on the uncomfortable one, where one stays forever. And he saw people down there. He saw actually even priests and bishops. They were there because they had not been faithful to the truth and because they had not been faithful to their flock. But he saw something which is perhaps something which we need to look at, each one of us right now. He saw that amongst the big sins that got them down there forever were not only abortion, homosexuality, and the classic ones that are classed as serious mortal sins, but also things that we might be committing right now and not looking at. Unforgiveness, hatred. And it is known from other sources that actually it does not only damage the soul in this life, but if not handled in time, can close the doors of heaven also. In this life it can damage us, first of all in society. I think you've all seen situations in Ireland where after a death, a family feud starts and never stops. People who don't talk to others within the same family, land issues, as though that were the be-all and end-all, or the soul is suffering, and also the family relations, peace gone to the window, for what? Land. But also the way in which the soul itself can start to become cancerous and embittered. Now look at a soul that is not forgiving, a soul that is harbouring grudges, entertaining nasty thoughts, of which the rest is then the natural expression. And you can see coming in there spiritual illness, which can pervade that cancerous soul and switch it off from any intimacy with the God of love forevermore. It gets used to it and doesn't feel the pricking of conscience anymore, and can't say, in all honesty, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive. It's actually as we have forgiven in the original. Now, this hit me when I was listening to a very good charismatic speaker in student days. He had been praying in many places because of the gifts he had. And when he was speaking to us students, he had this to say, amongst many other gems he had. But he had been praying in one place with a group, and he came to a lady, and as he was praying over her, the Lord showed him that there was in this lady's heart bitterness and unforgiveness. He was praying over her for her healing, but this word came strongly to him, very, very strongly actually, he insisted, and she then couldn't be prayed for anymore because this was an obstacle. So he stopped his prayer and asked her, "Dear, is there anything in your heart, any unforgiveness, anyone you haven't been able to let go of as regards some kind of vendetta or anything?" And immediately she answered, "The Germans. I lost my dear husband in the war, and never could I ever forgive or forget the Germans." Well, the good man of God tried to talk her through this. He could see the damage it was doing. And every time he asked, the same answer came back. "The Germans? Forgive the Germans? Never!" So he had to back down. But he knew what was the cause, and it was actually hardening her body. Bitterness was seeping through her system. Now it happened to be that he came back to the same group a couple of years later, and she was still there, but by now she was in a wheelchair. And he knew that the unforgiveness in her heart had made not only her soul hard and harsh and bitter, but also her body. And it could be seen by then on her face. Now, it may not be as dramatic as that for us, but if we're honest with ourselves, especially in Lent, it's an element we need to look at in the eyes, how ugly ever it might be. Now, with regard to Lent, this morning I spent a while in the abbey which is in front of the hermitage, and therefore in the graves which are around it. And many things came to my mind. I read an inscription here or there, and there was one which went somewhat in this direction. Death is not a going into the dark, but putting out the lamp because one is stepping into the dawn. There were others, but each stone, old and new, was a story. Some Irish poet has a very short poem which just says this. He's writing it in a graveyard. Lonely, 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 lonely. A story with a middle only. And so, as I thought of these, I thought if these stones could talk, they would say what was on our side of the full stop, and also what was on the other. If we could lift that tombstone, we would hear a pendulum. And it would be saying this: forever and ever and ever and ever. Or, depending on the history on one side, never, 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 never. And we pass by as though nothing had happened. But each stone is shouting at us. There was a grave in Glendalough which had just two words on it. Siste viator, Latin for traveller, halt. That would be perhaps a word for us in this Lent. Where are we going in such a hurry? That tomb is waiting patiently for us. Eddie Stones has great gifts, and a friend of mine went with her cousin, I believe, to see him some years ago after the death of the husband of this cousin. She went up to Eddie for prayer, and he prayed over her, and he was very quick in his prayer. And she was taken aback. My friend knew about her reaction and puzzlement and went up to Eddie in private later, and Eddie succinctly said this: if she saw what I had seen, she wouldn't want to know where her husband is. That's how thin the line is. And it could have been something like that, unforgiveness, that got her into irreversible trouble. We would perhaps do well to take as our model those who got there very quickly. I just finished with some gems from one of the most recently beatified, and actually somebody for our time, a young beatus, I think 15 years of age, not long deceased, but you will have heard about him by now. Blessed Carlo Acutis. I just want to quote some of his gems. Without any commentary of my own. It is important to go to confession often. The Eucharist is the highway to heaven. Our soul is like a hot air balloon. If by chance there is a mortal sin, the soul falls to the ground. Confession is like the fire underneath the balloon, enabling the soul to rise again. Continuously ask your guardian angel for help. Your guardian angel has to become your best friend. All people are born as originals, but many die as photocopies. I am happy to die because I live my life without wasting even a minute of it on anything unpleasing to God. The Virgin Mary is the only woman in my life. I offer all the sufferings I will have to suffer for the Lord, for the Pope and the Church. Do not be afraid, because with the incarnation of Jesus, death becomes life, and there's no need to escape. In eternal life, something extraordinary awaits us. The more we receive the Eucharist, the more we will become like Jesus, so that on this earth we will have a foretaste of heaven. When we face the sun, we get a tan, but when we stand before Jesus in the Eucharist, we become saints. By standing before the Eucharistic Christ, we become holy. This we cannot easily do under lockdown, so we have to make the equivalent in our life by creating a sacred space where the grace of God, which is never short, can zoom into our desire and fill us virtually where we are. He will, but we will have to prove that we want it. So Lent is a time for putting the brakes on. If we can't get the normal ways, we have to give the Lord a chance. But we can't if we don't. Therefore, concretely, have to have sacred space each day when we take the risk of facing the emptiness, apparently, where alone we can hear the still, small voice